chair against the wall, and I had to make a phone call. So I would call Jonathan's father and say, Mr. Jones, I'm Mr. Peters. Jonathan's a good teacher, and he had a rough day today. He threw a chair against the wall. I'd like to talk about how we're going to handle the situation. So now Jonathan's father, he's surprised. He might be tired. He's probably pissed. He might be at me. This is no way to establish a partnership. So the second year, I realized I need to reach out to all the families right at the beginning of the year while things are calm. And we can say, let's talk about how the summer went. What are your hopes for this year? Tell me about last year with Jonathan. I can create that relationship so later on I have this partnership to begin with. And that brings us to the first step out of 5 that I'm going to go through about making that design review meeting go a lot better. And the first is to establish relationships. And it sounds obvious, but we're so busy, we have all these things on our calendar, there's a lot going on. Sometimes, especially if you're in-house, you're going to have an email that introduces you to the team already. You're thinking, well, I got lots to do, there's going to be a meeting coming up later, I'll go to that meeting. But we want to make this a deliberate stage to establish the relationships. And we want to do it, in the beginning, we want to do it in a way that is really just creating a connection. So I walk up, say, hi, I'm Craig. I'm going to be the interaction designer on the project. I wanted to say hi, introduce myself, and let's schedule a time to go over things in greater detail later. So when I go over things in greater detail later, that's the stakeholder interviews, the subject matter expert interviews. And in those deeper conversations, we want to talk about success. We want to talk about success. When we think about success of the product or the site or the service, and we should, that makes a lot of sense. And that's what's going to, in these stakeholder conversations. But we also want to deliberately talk about success of the engagement. So we're going to have very specific parts of that conversation. We do things like a trip down memory lane. We do something called sentence completion, which I'll show you some examples later. These are to deliberately find out more about what is going to make the engagement successful, not just the product. One of my favorites is called Heaven and Hell. It goes like this. So I say, we're going to be working together for 4 months. And let's imagine we're now 4 months from now in the future and everything has gone great, better than expected. That's heaven. And I ask the stakeholder, imagine looking back 4 months from now from heaven. What are the specific things that happened to get us here? And then they start to explain certain things, and they're based on their experience with recent projects. And then we switch it and say, now, let's imagine we're in the future, 4 months from now. Everything went terribly. Worst project ever. Looking back 4 months from now, what got us here? What are the specific things? This is the most interesting part of this question. Because we'll hear things like, we got here because we were too polite with each other. That's really good for me to know, because on some projects, they weren't polite enough. Now I know that we need to check in differently with everyone on the team throughout the project. We can address that. They might say, we got to hell because halfway through the project, some senior leadership guy came into the meeting and gave a bunch of ideas, swooped in out of nowhere, and threw a wrench in the plan. The old swoop and poof. And I need to know about that, because not only do I want to know that that happens here, but I now have that guy on my list of people to go talk to right after this meeting. I'm going to get a meeting with that guy as soon as I can. I want to establish relationships with every single person who has a say in the next 4 months. Anyone who's going to have an interest and a say in those projects. So we've established the relationship, and I've learned. So are we ready now to have this meeting? We would be, except I want to make sure everyone knows the path of the project. So we haven't done that part yet with them. So we want to make sure everyone understands what's going to happen. And this is the second out of 5 here, to tell the story of the engagement. And as designers, information architects, I don't typically expect to hear people say, I love being a designer because I like to plan. I don't usually hear that. So we don't actually think of it that way as planning, and it's planning like a Microsoft project with Gantt bars. I personally like that. Most designers don't. What we think about it as, it's more applying some design thinking to the story of what's going to happen. It's a lot like the animations that we just saw in the last presentation. You're seeing this vision of what it could be, We want to show the vision of what the project is going to be. So we're designing the story. Now you'll see in the upper right, it'll be really small in the slides, but when you see the slides afterwards, you'll see them as well. When you look at them, there's a link. It's awasudesign.com, and sorry, my font is different than the font on this projector. It's the slide after, and this link will show up later. It says download. It's /download. All the examples that have that link, you'll find there. And you can download them, you'll see them as a PDF, but you can also see them as a source file. You can download the source file and you can make your own from them. And I'm going to show a whole bunch of examples. Every one of them is from an actual client project from the last 4 years, most of them from the last 2 years. And I'm showing a whole bunch of variety so you can see designing the story of the engagement is not a specific, there's no template. There's not a specific, this is the way to do it. It's whatever story you need to tell. So for example, this is the story of where we are in the design process from a concept point of view. This is from a client project. And here we're at definition, concept design. Here's another one. It's so small that it almost seems silly to include it. It's a 2-week project, and the only real information there's 3 sentences, and it says start date, end date. You think, Craig, why would we design this if it's so simple? Well, once we design this, it's really, we're doing a save as for the next one that are simple like this, but we want to send this message to the people in the meeting that we have, that we're going to lead them through this part of the project. And also to clarify, oh, it's not a 3-week project, or it really is this simple. Whatever story we need to tell, design that story. This one here is, it's 4 weeks long, and we're going to show some information along the path so we can start to see where they are in this design project. This one is a 2-pager, and what it shows is we're going to go through each of these. The earlier page would show what each one of those is. We'd have the requirements and the wireframe and design, and we're going to show one after the other. So they're going to cycle through. This one here is another 5-week. We added some icons there to help give them a sense of what they're going to be doing there. Turns out adding a little text with the icons across the bottom was even more helpful. And you'll see this one, what we did is there are multiple work streams. The user experience work stream, visual design, production research, and it's showing the different rounds. This one is 15 weeks. We have the project plans, we have the more detailed versions. But when we have this, it helps them see, they see the whole project all at once. This one got a little more involved across the bottom. We wanted to show the outcomes at each stage. So across the bottom, we showed at each stage. This one was going to be paid for incrementally. They needed a different statement of work, so their internal budgets get paid for these incrementally. So we're showing the outcomes at the bottom. This is what they're getting for that. This one is one of my favorites because this one we created, it's a table runner. It's the same concept, but it's 5-6 feet long. This is before we got the project. And so we're walking them through. We had the founder of the company, the director of engineering, and their lead design, director of design team in there. And when we got to this part, we turn the PowerPoint off. The lights are on. And I get them up around the diagram, and now they start talking about it. In this particular example, they started talking about which teams would be available for a sprint there and the development, and then they want to involve the system architect here. And then, yeah, but these designers, that designer is a little more flexible. Let's get her involved here. All I'm saying to myself is don't say anything, Craig. Don't say anything, Craig. Because they're just going at it. For 20 full minutes, they talked about this, which is a long time. This is before we got the project. It really helped them see the engagement. This one was a complex project for a really large bank that there were a lot of different work streams, a lot of different things that needed to come together. And these were being discussed verbally and in project plans. And a lot of people kept scratching their heads, us included, like, wait, what's happening? When is it? Is the content going to merge with the prototype? Which round? So all of these different pieces of information, this is many iterations later to help. And finally they say, oh, I see. That's what we're doing in round 1. That's what we're doing in round 3. This one was for our client needed to communicate broadly, not just the design part, but he needed to communicate the whole process and how it fits in with engineering and marketing requirements. So that's 18 months plus another 12 months. And so we're helping him tell his story because we're the visual thinkers and want to help that part as well. This one, same project, it's a conceptual model. So we're telling a story that's not a timeline. This is saying all of the requirements, all of the user stories can be looked at through the lens of, in this case, the passenger of an airplane. This is for this is to redesign the system that's the back end for airline reservations. Sabre is the existing one. This is for a Sabre replacement. This tells a story that for the first time, scores of people on the project could look at everything they're doing through these two lenses. And then we go into detail, of course, about what the concentric circles represent. Whatever the story is, we want to tell it visually. Here was a story where we wanted to help a team understand why if they want to break the mold a bit, they need to get out of this small incremental improvements piece because they no longer had a vision. So we wanted to create a framework for them. So we tell a story why it's important. With the framework, you can map to mental models. Users think in ABC, we want to make our interface say ABC. With a framework, we can maximize self-service. With a framework, we can create a shared vision. Whatever story we need to tell, we can design the story and tell it here at the beginning. Here's an example that's not a single page or a timeline. This is something that can tell the story of what we expect will happen on the project. In this case, it's more involved. It's a document. And here we can say, here's what we understand is the business need. Here's what we understand the project will be like. Here's what we understand the resources needed will be. And in this project, we'll have a wireframing stage, and we'll have a sitemap, and we'll have mock-ups, and we'll have user testing. And we also want to even design what we mean by that. So we can include these one-sheeters. Here's what a mock-up means. These are every project. We can include these on the projects that require that kind of design activity. Here they are again. However you need it to, whatever information you needed to explain, you can create those ahead of time. So now, we've gotten to know the folks. We've told the story of the engagement. Are we ready for the meeting yet? Almost, because we're smart people. We all have this little kingdom here. The little kingdom I possess, where thoughts and feelings dwell, and very hard, the task I find of governing it well. This is Louisa May Alcott. I put this up here because it's not easy for me to make sense of the project a lot of the times, or what are the important pieces. But when I finally get sense of that, and Toku gets sense of it in his mind, I have no idea if Toku's sense of it is the same as my sense of it. I need to know that before we get going with the project. Because when we get into a review, I don't want people to think the review is just going to be a bunch of gut reactions. I don't want people to think that we're just going to make judgments on however we happen to feel about making judgments that day. We want these to be comparisons. The ideas that we're evaluating, I want them to be based on something that we've all agreed on before, the objectives that we've agreed on. This is Aaron and Adam. They have a lot of discussion about this on their site. Which brings us to the 3rd out of 5 here. I want to create alignment on goals and objectives, and then some. I'm going to put a slide up that shows all 5 of these in one slide at the end as well. So what I mean by this is happening at the beginning. We have a discovery and strategy stage. And the kickoff meeting is one of the great places to make sure this is happening. We could do a whole talk just on making great kickoff meetings. If you want to see more about kickoff meetings, check out Kevin Hoffman. He does a great article, Kick-Ass Kickoff Meetings. It's a great bunch of work that Kevin does. I'm going to go over a couple things here. One is that we think of a kickoff meeting as an opportunity to get things done, not just introduce each other, learn roles and responsibilities, and look at a timeline. It's a rare opportunity to get this type of audience together. You're going to get the senior leadership, you're going to get the implementers, you're going to get the designers. Everyone's there. Take advantage of that time. So here in the schedule, you'll see on the far left is the project start, and the kickoff meeting is a week and a half later. We do that because there's a lot happening to get ready for that kickoff meeting, to make it an effective workshop more than a meet and greet. So we're talking to the stakeholders, we're analyzing the tool, we're looking at best practices, we're looking at the competition, so that when we're in that meeting, we can start to do things like make sure we have a really clear mission statement. Whatever format it takes on that project, they're different for a lot of projects. This one we have to say, here's the mission statement for the sake of how will users' lives be different, how will we accomplish this. They're not the same for every project, but whatever they are, we want to create alignment in that meeting. We want to create alignment on what everyone understands are the business objectives. Half of the reason for the discovery period, the part that's happening before design, is for us to learn. The other half is to create alignment among the entire project team. A lot of them are not talking to each other and in a whole group about these concepts until the design project. So we want to take advantage of that time. Here's a sentence completion. We have asked these questions of the stakeholders prior to the kickoff meeting. So we say, the single most important thing this engagement needs to provide is, and then we get all these answers. And now we're showing the answers in the kickoff meeting, and now they have a conversation about what they're seeing. They say, oh, I see, well, also, they're going to add, or they're going to clarify. So whatever those questions happen to be, here's another. The worst outcome of this engagement would be, and they describe things like that. The next example I'm going to show is for a product, a tool, internal tool. It's like a CRM tool, a relationship management tool for their internal sales team. It's 10,000 person internal sales team. And we wanted to know, do they want this tool to be more focused towards sales for new customers or servicing existing customers? So in the kickoff meeting, we have this slide comes up. What type of mobile tasks are, it was a mobile strategy project. Which ones are highest priority for this project? We've put the slider in the middle between sales and service. Would you move it? If so, where? If I wait about that long, I just waited now, we're not going to get much. So we have to wait. We have to wait because someone needs to stick their neck out. So one guy finally said, I've moved it to 3, and here's why. Now we've got, as soon as that happens, someone breaks the ice, it gets rolling. He explained why he thought it should be moved to a 3. His boss, a project sponsor, said he'd move it to 1, which I had no idea he felt that strongly about it until this came up. We had talked to him about this. I thought I understood it, but I didn't. It was a really great conversation. It would have been a real bummer to wait till that meeting to find out we were too far on the service side of things. There's another example. You can make whatever questions you want. What type of recommendations we want? Are we looking to get pragmatic? We need to have this built right away, or are we looking blue sky and create a roadmap and get things built there? And the main thing is this spurs conversation during the kickoff meeting. At the end of the discovery stage, when we've created alignment and we understand what the business goals are, we create a document, a design strategy document, another opportunity to say, this is what we all collectively understand. And it can look any way you need it to look. So here, for example, in this project, we've defined 3 principles. And we go into each principle in the design strategy document. Here's the first principle. We're going to increase productivity with this tool. And then we can go into that particular principle and say, we're going to manage this section of the tool. Here's an Uber story, the big one in italics. I want tools to review and manage this section so I can focus on my most valuable clients, and then I have the breakdown. It doesn't have to be this format. Whatever format you need and whatever system is being used at your organization, I want to create alignment prior to design. In this case, we can say, there's 10 pages like this. Here's another one. There's 8 more after this. And we can say every one of these bullet points will be addressed with the design framework when we're done. Okay, we've established relationships. We have told the story of the engagement, and we've got alignment and goals and objectives. We're almost ready, but first, we want to get some pre-approval. This is just prior to the meetings. We want to have some allies. And what I mean by that is there's going to be a core team typically, some people who are directly involved with the design group. And then there's going to be a broader audience. Well, when we're working with that core team, I'm going to show them what the presentation is ahead of time, so there's no surprises. But that's usually not enough, because what they usually say is, okay, well, how about this, and not sure about that. They might say a few things. But I want to know, are they comfortable? Are they going to identify the problems that might come up in that review meeting that we're going to be in? So I want to put them on the spot, actually call them out. Let's get them to commit. So you can ask them direct questions while you're getting that pre-approval. You can say, do you have any concerns about this direction? At the end of the last meeting, there were some concerns about this. How do you feel about those things now? What do you think so-and-so might say about this, or what might be coming up for them? While they're describing these things, as they come up with their answers, they might say something that's particularly well-spoken. And even if it isn't, I'm going to say, that was great. You say it better than I do. Tomorrow in the meeting, I'll hand it over to you. I think it'd be great for the project team to hear that from you. Marissa's going to introduce this next section. Now Marissa's going to say something. She and I talked about it a couple days earlier. It's helping everyone feel like this is not just a big reveal where we're trying to wow the rest of the team. This is all of us working together to make this happen. All right, are we ready? Yes, we are. We're ready now for that meeting. And I hope you're seeing here that to make that meeting go really well, most of what we're focused on so far is what happens prior to that meeting. We're also going to talk about some things that happen in the meeting. So we are ready, finally. And the fifth piece here, and I'm going to give some examples, is we want to elevate the conversation to strategy. If there are two most important things I want you to take away from this presentation, one is it's what happens before the meeting that really makes a difference. And the second is this slide right here. We want to elevate the conversation to strategy whenever we can. There's a reason for our designs. There's a reason why we recommend this structure. There's a reason why we have gotten rid of other ideas. And that strategy is tied back to the organization's needs. It's tied back to the business goals. It's tied back to the user needs. So there's lots of ways to do that. One, set the stage. We call these, we think about the presentation. Like if we're going to do wireframes or a sitemap, there's a part of the document that has the wireframes and the sitemap. But prior to that, we call them context slides or the storytelling slides. For example, just in the document, we say, here we are today. This is for the design strategy, for a design strategy presentation. We tell them, this meeting marks the end of this stage, and here's what we've been doing. In fact, we'll spell it out for you. We've been doing this many stakeholder interviews. We talked to these producers. Tell the story. Here's where we are in the timeline. I'm jumping to a different project here. Timeline they've seen before, show them where they're at. It doesn't take long to go through these at the beginning of a meeting, and it really helps satisfy a lot of those challenges. Why are we talking about this now? What do we need? What do we need to be focusing on? The eye on the prize, you can call this the goals or why we're here. This eye on the prize is, there's two reasons for this. One is to remind us all of what we're designing for. I hope that's an obvious reason. The other is, these quotes are from stakeholders, and it might be from key leadership folks. It sends a message that it's not just the design team putting these ideas forward in the rest of this document, in the rest of this meeting. It's us working together. It's like they're presenting this document with me when I put this in every document. And they've seen this before, and they're going to see it every single document. Now that in this particular case, the one at the bottom, when we started the project, our sponsor said, we're going to need to talk to so-and-so because so-and-so, it's a little tricky, the relationship between her group and our group. I really want to make sure she feels like she's part of the project. So not only did we talk to her, we put her quote on the page. Make sure she sits up, she's like, I am important. That's right, she's presenting this with us, right from the beginning. So I'm going to go through some examples. And these examples I've chosen are for some big complex projects. As you're looking at these, it's any design project where you need to convey some context before you get into the actual work. And if it's a simple project, you can make it a one-page context section. So I'm going to start with the complex ones because you can think backwards from those. So here's a sitemap review. It's a really large site. There were 75 people involved on the client side. And the sitemap ends up being 32 pages long, so it's a lot to get through. So we start off by saying, today, sign-off means this. In the upper left, we're saying this is what we're going to focus on today. And then in the paragraphs on the bottom, we're talking about this is what it means, this is where we're headed. The most important part is the upper right. This is saying, well, here's what we're not going to focus on today. We don't need to talk about the complete list of calls to action. We don't need to wonder if the resource center's content is correct yet. These are the things that we can head off before the meeting starts. And then we get into helping them understand what we're going to look at. We call this the levels of Zoom slide. And on the far left, this is the highest level. It's the abstract diagram of the whole program. And on the far right, it's the individual pages. That's the 34 versions of that far right. So the abstract diagram. When they saw this, we're still telling the story of the engagement. We're doing it at the start of the sitemap meeting. The key sponsor of the project said, oh wow, I need this for our steering committee meeting. They loved this because they finally, for the first time, could see their whole project holistically all at once. So then we zoom in, we say, oh, we were hearing, what about these entry points? Have we dealt with those? So we answer that before the meeting starts. Zooming in a little further, here's the section of the site. See the colors here. You see the colors again here, the same colors. We're doing levels of zoom. By this point, a lot of their questions have been answered, and we can get into the sitemap without a lot of bumps. Another example here, so user flow, same project. We want to tell them at the beginning, here's what we've been doing, here's how we came about defining the approach to the user flows. And in fact, well, okay, first we do another sign off. Here's what we should focus on today. Here's what we don't need to focus on. And then we want to help them understand, and this is designing this, it's tricky, because if you say, they had all these user types for this project, or a whole bunch. And we want to help them understand, if we try to look at user stories for every single one of them, and the whole site, we'd have hundreds of user stories. It would be unmanageable. So we say, Alice there in the middle, we're going to have her do a couple tasks, and she's going to address part of the site, which is the circle. And then we go forward and say Don and Kate are going to address a couple other tasks. By the time we go through all these user stories, we will have addressed the whole site. Here they are again. Here's Alice. Here's her trigger and her motivation. Here's what she's going to address. And this is the same folks, and we're showing the different parts of the site. By this point, everyone's a bit calmed down. They know what we're going to look at, and they sort of know how to participate. They know how to view the rest of this presentation. In fact, we went further. There were different key capabilities. This project had different ones with different budgets. So some people said, yeah, but I want to make sure that learning center area, have we addressed that correctly? We zoomed in prior to even showing the first user story, of the user flow. Also, that product recommendation tool is a real important one. Big budget. The product owner is going to be in the meeting. We're spelling out how we've taken that into consideration, how it is important. It's only here on page 9 or 10, whatever page we're at, that we can start the user flows for this project. And again, I recognize this is a lot of documentation, and we want to move quickly. This works. We do a lot of projects with startups. We do a lot of projects with big companies that are agile. We do these projects where we're iterating regularly. We're getting new designs cranked out every week, and we still tell the story. It's a one-pager instead of a 9-pager. Tell the story where we're at. Show them. Design something that shows them what part of the agile process we're in. A simple list of which features we're designing for this week. A wireframe review. Just want to show a different layout, different format. Tell them where we're at. Here's that. This is the eye in the prize type slide. Here's where we are in the project. Here's what we've been doing since the last meeting. And here's what sign-off means. This is the same one about what we're going to focus on, what we're not going to focus on. This is a little education on how to think about wireframes. We always tell them, think about wireframes like a whiteboard. You know everything on a whiteboard is going to change. Just because these are done in Illustrator today, they're going to change just as much as a whiteboard. We want to educate them on what they're going to do and how to respond in a project. This is some of the goals and objectives specific to this part of the project. And they've seen this before in the design strategy, but we're going to show them because this is what we're focusing on. In wireframes, we're going to show them this again, and then we would get into it. So those are 3 examples, and like I said, whatever your project is doing, tell that story in your content slides. So now when we get into the actual reviewing of the wireframes and of the material, we want to use a narrative as much as possible. Because we can show slides, and we can show the sitemap, we can show mock-ups, we can show wireframes. When we use a narrative, it helps tie back to the end user and also to the business goals. So for example, here we're going to talk about, we're looking at this application, and it's Gordon, the producer. Gordon, he does this today, and then he's going to get into, it's simple stuff to help set the stage. Now, that story, you can do it, whatever story you need, whatever the design is. And when you get into it, we want to walk through the designs. We've got a few ideas here. The key so far is what happens prior to the meeting. And these are some of the things that we do in the meeting. So we want to weave the goals and objectives into that narrative. Whatever those goals and objectives were, we're going to weave it into Gordon's story. We want to show the interaction step by step. So if we have if we say clicking here will result in this, we're going to show a hand, the cursor there. We're going to show it. It might be 50 pages for 7 screens because we're going to show the interaction throughout. It's like flipbook style. So it's a step before rapid prototyping. We're going to remind them throughout how to give feedback. So if we told them at the start of the meeting, what we're looking for is feedback on whether or not this is going to make sense for these business goals. We're going to reiterate that throughout the meeting and ask questions directly towards those instructions. Throughout, as we're selling the idea of the designs, we want to keep thinking back to and referencing those goals and objectives. The reason we're doing this, what we want to ask ourselves here, and we have a couple options here, is which option is going to address, and then we state the business goal as we're going forward. Helps everyone think about the same thing. And then we have to pick our battles. There's a lot of things that we'd like to win the design argument over, but we want to be real selective on which ones are the most important. I don't want to die on every hill. Not every hill is worth it. We also try to solve later. It's really tempting to get into a conversation in a review, especially when someone says to me, oh yeah, and it's fun. We're designers, we want to show solutions. But we'll take it down, okay, what we're talking about is a better way to address it. We're hearing that this is not addressing that as well as everyone thinks we could. We'll take that away and we'll solve that. My design director is probably her favorite point. She keeps telling me, Craig, please stop solving in the meetings. We can do that later. And they do it better than I do anyway, so I shouldn't be solving in the meeting. So that's the 5 points. I'm going to put them up again. And I want to show this little anecdote is around basically saying whatever it takes to get the ideas across is really what's driving all of these ideas. And so here's an example where we showed wireframes as a tablet browser. It was a fast, it was 90 days, which was lightning fast for a big bank. They wanted to focus on 4 features. We were pretty far into the design. We've been reviewing with them regularly. And we're showing them here, as you swipe this way, they're going to load, and they're going to load one at a time, and these will come up from below. And we were doing, this is the flipbook style. We had a whole bunch. We're telling the story incrementally. And then if you click all topics, this is going to happen. We're describing it. The client said, yeah, we're just, I don't know. So we reviewed the goals and objectives. We went through what we're trying to achieve. We're telling through the point of view of the consumer who's consuming these articles. These are for like hedge fund analysts to get documents from analysts. And they said, it's just, yeah, that's all true, but it just doesn't feel tablet-y enough. It doesn't feel tablet-y enough. So we said, okay, we take that down, not tablet-y enough. And we left. We had worked through it as much as we could in the meeting. We're not going to try to solve it in the meeting. So these were done in Illustrator. We go back, one of our designers takes them from Illustrator and puts them into After Effects, and he creates a 16-second video that looks like this. We changed nothing in the design. Not a single thing. They're even from the exact document that they were looking at. And they said, this is great, we love it. Whatever it takes to get the ideas across. Nowadays with mobile, we're seeing the transitions are the design as much as the design is the design. You know what I mean? So we have to show the transitions. These are the 5 points that we were going through. Strong relationships, tell the story of the engagement, creating alignment, generating allies, and then elevating the conversation strategy. This is me. That's the Twitter and the email, and these are those things again, but this time with the hashtags across the top. Thank you so much for your time. Any questions? Yeah, no.
So, who is responsible for creating these documents along the process?
In our case, it's the same designers who are doing the wireframes and sitemaps.
So does that change? I mean, I'm assuming sort of based along the design process, and then sort of as UX designer, visual designer, so that changes responsibility based on the case.
In our particular case, we're a small shop. There's 10 of us, and so there are hybrid designers. But more importantly, these are all we're doing save as, and we're reusing as much as we can for all of these context setting and slides. Yeah. Okay.
When you're putting together these documents to show companies that you're working with, how do you weave in like the legal aspects? I mean, do you have to run these by lawyers first, or because you've got designers coming up with these documents, but I assume there's some intersection of like legal and even psychological in the case of the last gal was talking, the concepts you're trying to get across and what you can't present to them, without putting yourself in a liable situation.
Okay, let me double check. Did everyone up here hear the question? Yeah, okay, great. So around whether or not and how we deal with the legality or legal and compliance, it really depends on the context of our delivery. We typically are delivering, in this case, UX frameworks and design frameworks. And so that stage, those folks are involved. but we're not getting final copy and final approvals until later in the process. So we're involving them. This isn't going public, so it's just with the project team. So that, the aspect of what we're showing in the documents hasn't been a concern from a legal and compliance point of view. Content and designs and accessibility, that's part of the plan. Sometimes we're involved in that. Sometimes we've handed that off by then, because most of our clients have design teams. More questions? Yeah, right here.
The meeting that was sort of central to all these things that you named, where you set the stage at the beginning, that specifically,
Yeah.
in the scope of the entire project, where's that meeting happening? I know it's happening before like the design phase and stuff, but like where in the process of all the extensions that you're talking about?
So and the question is, for that big gnarly meeting, where in the process is that meeting? I'll answer it two ways. One is, in that particular case, we're about halfway. We're in the middle. That was a 5,000-hour project, huge project. It was 10 months long. It was a big project. But the second way I want to answer that question is, it doesn't matter which meeting it is or where that I want to, if it's the very first meeting, I'm going to tell the story about what do they need to hear as audience members in the very first meeting. And when they're in the 20th meeting, or if they're in an agile design process, and what do they need to hear every meeting? So whatever story they need to hear to be effective in that meeting, I'm going to tell that story. More questions? All right, I'll be around, and I'll be up here and around during lunch as well. We're getting together at 5 too, up here. Thank you.